Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for what is our last open day of 2020. So obviously we'll be opening the champagne at the end of the presentation. I'm joined today by Will. Say hello, Will.
Will it let me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hopefully everyone else can.
Okay, fantastic. Hi, everyone. Let me see if I can get my video on as well.
You should be able to. I think there he is.
There we go.
Lovely. So I hope you're all doing well today. I can see some of you are a little west of us, so it's still the morning for you, which must be nice. A whole day ahead of you. So we're going to kick things off then by looking at a few of highlights of the. Oh, I haven't even introduced us properly. So my name's Matt. I know. You'd think after all these weeks of practice, wouldn't you? So my name is Matt. I look after our research here at UniAdmissions. So it's my job to make sure that everything we suggest today and in the rest of our work is based on evidence. So this is the most exciting time of year for me, as I get to find out what people have been up to in their interviews. And Will, what do you do?
Yeah, hi everyone. Anyone who's been to some of these before will have sort of heard this already. But I lead our team of consultants here at UniAdmissions. So when parents, students want to get in touch with us and talk about their application, they usually come through to me or one of my team. We basically make sure that we're able to help them in the best way possible, recommend programs where necessary, but give guidance when not necessary as well. And yeah, that's basically what I do.
Fab, thank you, Will. If you see me squinting, anyone, it is extremely sunny directly behind me. And unfortunately, because I have such a wall of screens instead of my office, it's putting me right in the center of a lot of light. So it may be that I get melted over the course of the call. If that does happen, which I hope it won't, you can get in touch with us directly by booking a consultation on the UniAdmissions website. There should be a little prompt down on the left-hand side of the page, and you'll find this box on there as well, and that'll allow you to speak to Will and some of his team to get more direct answers to any questions you might have. I can see from the polling we've got a mix of people who are mid-application and people who are planning further ahead today, which is fortunate because that's what I've done the slides for. Always pleasing when that comes off. So first of all, to talk about the things we're really happy with. Obviously, we're coming to the end of 2020. We've worked this year with over 350 students, which is our biggest number ever, as well as very nearly 1,500 tutors. It may even be more than that now. I know these things tick up week on week, giving us an enviable student to teacher ratio of something like 1 student to 4 teachers, which I suppose could be intimidating, but seems to work. And we're rapidly closing on 10,000 hours of hours studied this year. I know we've got enrichment seminars later on today, so hopefully we'll be really getting close to that magical Malcolm Gladwell number over the next few days. We've also worked with 93 further students. This number again may have snuck up since I put these slides together through the foundation, which is targeted to students who are eligible for free school meals in areas of low ACORN or polar attainment and things like that. The message here is if you would like to work with us but don't feel that you can afford it, please do get in touch anyway. It is highly likely that we'll be able to figure something out through the foundation and associated bursaries. And our target for 2022, which felt very far off when I first made these slides, and then I realize is next year plus 3 weeks now, is just be working with 1 foundation student for every paid student we have as well. So as to really be making sure that everything we do is as equitable as it can be. We're also particularly proud of our books, which have all been updated this year and with fancy new covers that I was in charge of. You can get these on Amazon, and they're also part of any package you book with us comes with an awful lot of books. We've yet to have any student complain that there aren't enough books, put it that way. In terms of our research, we spent a lot of time on Zoom this year, taking part in the virtual open days, making sure everything we were talking about this was as up to date as it could be. We've been able to open up new sources of freedom of information data, which has given us real insights into GCSE scoring in particular. We've been able to update all of our resources in line with the admissions tests, which tend to change year from year. And those that have moved on to computers like the BMAT, we were able to offer targeted support for that, which we're really proud of, particularly given the challenges a lot of students encountered with that we know about. So again, this research, we've been able to find information on the average GCSE scores of applicants for various subjects at Cambridge, which is really valuable in helping us assess the chances for students and to give them reassurance that they've still got a shot when they're sometimes quite anxious about that. And we've got my favourite little video clip of Philip Knox here from English at Cambridge, making you feel better about not having done the Duke of Edinburgh.
I suppose if you are extremely interested and excited by things that are not related to the subject of English, like sport or music or something like that, that's great. But we're probably not that interested actually in that element of your well-rounded self. I'd
like to put that in here just as a little note of comfort for parents who might be worried that their children haven't been doing enough piano exams or Duke of Edinburghs or anything like that. When it comes to Oxford and Cambridge, the important thing is that you're interested in and passionate about the subject. It's not whether you're passionate about rugby or the flute, unless you're applying for music, in which case obviously the flute is important. One of the other things we've been able to do through our research this year is start to build predictive models for some of these exams. So we have we think a rough idea of where the average offer score for people getting into UCL this year will be, which we're optimistic about. So that's a little help for the students who are working with us on that. And this is the kind of information we really enjoy developing and sharing with the students who come to work with us. Now, we haven't got Rohan here this week, Will, but can you do the pie chart?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that I end up talking about quite a lot with parents and students, because obviously as an Oxbridge applicant, something that you're really keen to know is, well, how are they actually going to be measuring me? What matters? What's important when it comes to this application? And then, of course, what that does is it helps inform you as to where you should be spending your time. Any smart applicant will spend the most time on the thing which makes the biggest difference. So you can see here that there are three key things, generally speaking, or three big predictors as to whether or not you'll be given an offer. That's exam grades, so GCSE and predicted levels and your performance on those, your admissions test performance, and your interviews performance. And roughly speaking, they each make up about 30% of the decision whether or not to accept the student. It's worth saying that this does vary from subject to subject and from university to university. So Oxford and Cambridge do approach things slightly differently. And within those universities, different subjects will approach things slightly differently. But this is a really helpful rule of thumb and a pretty good indicator of where you should be spending your time as an applicant generally. So if you have an admissions test, you should be spending a lot of time on it. Obviously, for this year's cohort, they would have done the admissions test at this point. So what's left is the interview. And that's still going to make an enormous difference, and it's worth spending as much time as you can on working on that. And naturally, for those of you applying next year or the year after, one big takeaway from this session should be that the admissions test is very, very important, and you should certainly spend a considerable amount of time on it. So admissions test, interview, and exam grades, that takes you to about 90% of the decision. And then sort of as a catch-all, we've got this final 10%, which just says everything else. Generally speaking, that contains things like your personal statement, your school references, a list of other slightly less quantitative measures of you. But generally speaking, far less important. So schools will often spend a lot of time working on the personal statement and don't really allocate huge amounts of time or proportional amounts of time to other parts of the application process. It should really be the other way around, because for the vast majority of subjects, the personal statement isn't going to be hugely influential. So yeah, if you're so young that you've still got GCSEs to come, then absolutely, there's a big difference you can make there. But if you're in year 12, those are set in stone, those are done for most people. So now it's time to focus on the other parts of this chart.
Fab. Thank you, Will. The
No
sun is
problem.
still blinding me, as I'm sure you can see over there, but I'm going to persist through. Hopefully it will go down during the course of the day. If not, bad consequences for my understanding of physics. So I can see from the polling that most of you are here planning ahead for next year, which is excellent news. So we offer, I'm afraid this is going to be you again, Will. We offer, rather than just a tutoring service where we pair you up with someone and sort of leave you to it, at UniAdmissions, our research and our efforts and really our whole philosophy is that what you need is a program of study rather than to just work with someone on a sort of ad hoc basis. So Will, I'm afraid you're stuck doing the next few slides.
No, that's quite all right.
So off we go.
Yeah, so what I was just going to add as well is if we're thinking about the pie chart and you think about all the effort that you put into your GCSEs and your A levels, and that's only 30% of the decision to accept you. So naturally, the rest of the stuff takes a lot of work as well. And that's why we sort of have this approach of having, you know, a program which supports you sort of comprehensively all the way through, basically from when you come to us to your very final interview. And that is typically made up of 4 key components. So tutoring, you can see on the left there. It's obviously really important to have the one-to-one attention in order to cover particular areas where you struggle on. Now, we're very keen to keep the tutoring as bespoke as possible. Because naturally one student who might find the admissions test very difficult, but the interview is much easier, will certainly need to be spending their time differently to a student who, you know, has strengths in different areas. And typically speaking, students will have tutoring fairly regularly through the whole of their program. So the year 12 students who are joining us now, they'll be starting to have tutorials maybe once every other week, once every few weeks, to start working gradually on their application. The day courses are sort of scattered through the year, and you know, they're there to really consolidate and work intensively on individual parts of the application. So there's one for the personal statement, one for the admissions test, and one for the interviews. But they're not as consistent. The tutoring is very consistent. The enrichment seminars are consistent. The day courses are there sort of as a final jab to really help students get into the zone and make sure that they've sort of covered everything that they wanted to cover just before going into either the test or the interview. The enrichment seminars, they run weekly. You know, Matt alluded to them going on earlier. These split into different subject streams. So if you're a medic, you'll be going to medicine-specific enrichment seminars. If you're a mathematician, you'll be going to the STEM seminars with, you know, the physicists and the engineers. If you're a lawyer, you go to the law seminars. So each week we've got this huge, expansive syllabus of things that our students are learning. And, you know, those really, you know, seeing those running really turns us more and more into, you know, into a prep school compared to just sort of one-off tutoring like Matt was saying. And then, of course, as with any good prep school, the students will have homework outside of those tutorials. Students are often tasked with working on their admissions test or drafting their personal statement or finding new things to put on the personal statement or developing interview skills. And we provide them with a number of textbooks for each subject, preparation platforms for the tests, unlimited marking and feedback for any essays involved and for the personal statement, all these other things which sort of happen outside of that classroom time, but are really, really important for the long-term consistency of a student's progression. And that brings us to basically the 4 key parts. I think we've got some examples for specific subjects. So yeah, you can see here, tuition, the first part, quite important. Generally, this is tailored to the individual. So certain students will need much more expansive support than others. And that's really something that comes up in my discussions with students, you know, the extent of the support from their school, from their parents, their academic profile when they come to us. And, you know, it's down to the consulting team to make a calculation as to what this student needs to be successful. And a lot of that comes down to adjusting the amount of tutoring. The number of day courses will vary slightly depending on the needs of the student. So anyone who's applying for medicine to, well, for this example, it's Cambridge, you'll know that you have to sit 2 admissions tests, unlike most applicants. And naturally, you know, we want to make sure that we're able to provide enough to support you for all parts of your application. So you have more day courses on that front. And we often do supplementary day courses through the year. So a typical one is a additional maths day course, because so many of the admissions tests load on maths, but you might not have been doing maths at A level. So it can be helpful to have a bit of time dedicated to that as well. Which brings us to enrichment seminars. Yeah, so like I said earlier, you know, you'll be going to very different seminars depending on your subject. The PPE applicants are pretty lucky because they get to go to 2 streams. They get to go to the humanities stream and the economics stream. So they get twice as many seminars as a standard student. But it is really important for our students to be engaged with their subject area consistently. You know, Oxbridge tutors aren't looking for people who have just started reading as many books as they could in the last month because they realized I'm going to have an interview. They're looking for people who have been consistently from a young age exploring and developing in their subject area and being incredibly academically curious. Now, it can be difficult, you know, to know where to start. When I was applying to Oxford, you know, it's difficult to just come up with the first book to read. And you know, the universities publish reading lists, but these are not very specific to an individual. They're usually very generic. These enrichment seminars are there to help springboard students into subjects that they like. So some of them will be really interesting, and we've always got further reading and pre-reading. Some of them, you know, as a medical applicant, you might be really interested in medical science, and you might be really interested in that side of things, but you might not be so interested in psychiatry. That's absolutely fine. You're not meant to know about everything, but you are meant to be interested in your subject. So these seminars really help you do that.
And that brings us on to the resources. I'm going to let Will have a little break here.
That's very kind.
Yeah, so that ranges from, we have online courses available for all of our admissions tests, which give students the opportunity to really work through all of the key skills they need for those admissions tests in their own time. They've also got huge, one of the heaviest books I've ever seen, absolutely huge books of practice papers and questions for all of these exams. The BMAT one runs to nearly 600 pages in A4 and with quite small type. It's a heck of a book. I know this because I had to edit it earlier in the year. It took a very long time. Really, we have never had a problem with students who we cannot find enough practice questions for. And for the interviews themselves, we also have our Oxbridge interview guide, which is updated each year with new insights, new questions, and new information as we study the interview process, which is what we're coming on to now. So interview preparation, I know from looking at the polling, we've got, I think, 3 people who have interviews coming up in the next few days, which is exciting. So I'm going to share with you a few little tips. Obviously, for our interview sessions, when we run these as part of the day courses, those are going to hopefully be back in person in 2021. And those are based on a mix of peer feedback and one-to-one interviewing, which we've found is really effective. And that's a course that lasts the full weekend instead of the single day this year, at least. As I say, hopefully we're going back to in person next year. The interviews themselves, how do they work? They're much more structured and strict than you might think. People hear horror stories about, silly questions, how much water is there in all of the seas? Tell me about a banana. You really don't get very much like that anymore. That might have been the case 20 years ago or longer ago, but the whole system is really quite formal and structured now. Everything is audited internally. All of the interviews are graded by each of the participating interviewers, and everything is audited and centrally looked after to make sure everything that goes on is really scrupulously fair. So what do you need to do in the interview, which is the real question, I'm sure. So this is taken from the one of the interview packs that it's given to the interviewers for law, and they say in that the 3 key characteristics they're looking for are application, which they define as a high degree of concentration, a clear enthusiasm for pursuing a problem, working passionately and being really engaged by the content that you're given. They ask for reasoning, being able to react thoughtfully, when you present an argument that it's free of contradictions and you make it strongly, but at the same time, if you find yourself down an unproductive line of thinking, if you're digging yourself into a little bit of a hole, that you know to stop and get out of that and move on to a more productive idea of thinking. And for all of that to be communicated really clearly and articulately in speech and of course in writing, although they're not testing the writing in the interview. And obviously the interviews this year are taking place on Zoom. Well, in the case of Cambridge, they are Oxford doing on Microsoft Teams. Our tips, I think Will's been doing a good job so far. It's what I try and work on myself. It's looking into the camera. It will make it feel like you're making eye contact with the other person, and it does make a big difference to the experience. Make sure you've worn proper clothes. Again, Will's ticked the box here. Make sure you're properly dressed, even out of shot. Maybe wearing shoes will help you feel more serious and grounded. You can try out a few options there. Don't rush. The lack of body language on Zoom and similar makes it even harder to understand what people are saying sometimes. So be clear, articulate, and don't feel you have to rush. Keep your glass of water to hand. If you feel you need to stop and reset for a second. You won't have any body language, so be prepared to smile a little more broadly, make your eyes a little bit wider just to convey that enthusiasm through the screen, as you won't have your arms or the rest of your body to use to convey things. And make sure that the interviewer can see you clearly. Again, this is just a case of setting up the room well. Make sure you've got the room with the good Wi-Fi, you've got the lighting right so they can see you clearly and you can give a good account of yourself. I hope I've managed it today. Now, because the interviews are ongoing quite literally at the moment, we're not able to offer any specific support directly for students, is my understanding, but we do really recommend picking up the Oxbridge Interview Guide on Amazon. It has a lot of our expertise sort of crammed in there, as well as a lot of practice questions, and you can get that in Kindle if you really can't get it printed out in time, delivered in time, sorry. And that can be a really helpful support even at this late stage. But Will, that brings us to the programs themselves. So I'm going to hand it back to you to talk about our kind of classic program 1.
Yes. So I just thought I'd make a quick note on what you said about us supporting people for interviews, because there will be some medics who don't have their interviews till February.
Yes, I've forgotten about the medics.
Yes. So really it depends on when your interview is. If it's tomorrow, then there's really very little that we can do to help. If it's in a few weeks' time, which is unlikely for Oxbridge, but more likely for medical applicants, or in a couple months' time, then there's a lot that we can do to help. And generally speaking, whether you're preparing on your own or preparing with us, what matters is that you do start preparing. So any students listening, try not to leave it to tomorrow. Try to do something after this today, which is going to help with your interviews. Any parents, it might be worth saying the same thing to your kids, because it's so easy for time to slip away from you, and you don't want to end up feeling unprepared on the day. But that's for this year. When it comes to next year, obviously we've got a huge amount of time, and it's really important to make sure that we're using that time well. Generally speaking, we liked to support students for longer because we know from past experience that they're more likely to get their offers. So you'll see it on this slide. It's also sort of plastered all over the website. On average, our students have a 63% chance of getting into Oxford or Cambridge. That's significantly higher, or well, there's a sample of students who start earlier who generally do better. So if you use just that sample, the success rate would be better. The 63 is across all students that join us at all different times for a single year's application process. So if you're starting a year in advance, you're putting yourself in the best position possible, because those are the people that almost always succeed at an extremely high rate. And the kind of support that we do with you is follows those same general principles, those four key parts: so the tutoring, seminars, the day courses, and the materials. Now, if you just put a few hours a week into your Oxbridge application, you'll find that that adds up pretty quickly. And often, you know, when I'm speaking with students, I say to them, this is a big time commitment. We're going to be expecting you to work very hard, upwards of 180 hours at least. And that can seem like quite a lot. But actually, if you break it down, that's just over 3-4 hours a week across the year. And naturally, that's really, really flexible as well. So there will be some weeks where you're just very, very busy at school. Mock exams is a very common period where our students dial down the work that they're doing with us. But equally, there will be times when you've got more time for this and you want to invest it in because you know the benefit that comes from that. You know, to give you an example, if you can't on one of the weeks with an intensive course, that's 8 hours already, just in that one day. So it's quite easy to get to that overall amount of time, provided you work consistently and reliably. And again, so we recommend that amount of time because that is what correlates with success. Starting early, investing more time, have a very, very strong relationship with getting your offer from Oxford or Cambridge. And we designed the program to be able to provide you everything you need. So that 180 hours roughly represents about half of it is teaching, taught time, so with your one-to-one tutor or in groups at the day courses and at the seminars. And about half of it is self-study. So working through the textbooks, working through the preparation portal, all those different things that are important and contribute to you developing as an applicant. Must be said that obviously, you know, we do make sure that our programs are tailored and fit for individual students, but generally speaking, at this time of year, with an average applicant profile, this is the kind of thing that I'd recommend for a student.
Yeah, and I know there are a few people here who are planning even further ahead, which is excellent news. So those of you who are working towards your GCSEs or have just done them, we also have the Head Start program.
Yeah, so naturally, oh, sorry, did you want to?
No, you go on. You're the expert. I actually
Okay.
don't know what I only know what it says on the slide.
Sure. So for year 10 and year 11 students that come our way, you know, it's really important that again, it's all about making the most of the time that you have and being sensible with it. What we don't want to do is have a year 10 student doing mock step papers once a week for 3 years, because by the end of it, they're probably going to lost sight of why they're doing it and also have lost interest. But we do want to use this time effectively, and we start developing the soft skills that Oxford and Cambridge are so keen on, and the soft skills that they're really trying to measure at interview. So our Head Start students, either year 10 or year 11, they'll be having a one-to-one consultation once a month through the year. And they'll also be going to the weekly enrichment seminars. So it's a really good opportunity, especially for people who are a bit unsure of maybe which A-levels they will want to choose. They're undecided between PPE or E&M, or even subjects slightly further apart. So maybe they're undecided between engineering and geography. It's a really good opportunity to really explore both of those options to the full extent possible. And then at the end of the year, you've developed all your Oxbridge soft skills, you've explored your subjects to a really good level, and you've identified what you want to study. You're then ready to hit the comprehensive program hard and make sure that you're able to do well on all the specific things that Oxford and Cambridge are measuring you. So it is a more relaxed approach. It's not as intensive as what we have our year 12, year 13 students doing, but it's all about helping students develop early on and earn those skills, so that when it comes to year 12, it's all the kind of things which Oxford and Cambridge are looking for, it's second nature to you.
Fab. Thanks, Will.
No problem.
Now, of course, we said the impact all of this has is that we're able to get something of the order of 63% of our students into Oxford and Cambridge. This varies from course to course, but that is a number that we're really proud of. We're also very proud of our Trustpilot reviews. If you enjoy this webinar, please do leave us one. We enjoy them all. You can even say something nice about Will, as this slide still doesn't have anyone mentioning him on it. I know I could have resisted making that joke for the 15th week in a row, but I decided to stick with it.
I was pretty sure you wouldn't, so that's fine.
Well, it's been a long it's been a long running joke. It'd be a pity to lose it now.
Yeah.
But that brings us to the end of the structured part of this presentation. If you'd like to book a consultation with us, please follow the GIF that should now be playing, which will show you how it's done. And drop any questions you have for us into the Q&A section, and we will tackle those in just a moment. But yeah, thank you for joining us so far and sitting through all the slides. Please send over any questions you have, and we'll do our best to answer them.
So there is one question that we had from a little while ago, saying how to start the interview. And now I presume that's with the online interview in mind. But I mean, Matt, do you have any specific tips for starting in an online interview in comparison to starting in a normal interview?
Yeah, so as with the normal interview, they'll probably ask you a nice warming up question about your day or something like that. Just try to really relax into the experience and try and feel comfortable. All the usual stuff as well. Be polite, smile, say please and thank you, that sort of thing. But the trick is to really try and relax into the experience rather than feeling too rushed.
Yeah.
Try and enjoy it to the extent you can. Yeah.
So when I interviewed, my approach was very much, this on its own, this experience. If that's all that I get out of this, then I'm still very happy, because and again, I got to go to visit the college and stay there, so slightly different for those zooming in, but still, this is a great opportunity, and do make the most of it and do enjoy it while you're doing it. Anonymous attendee, they always ask a lot of questions. Anonymous attendee.
They come every week as well.
They're asking how much the programs cost. It really depends. So, of course, a student that comes to me now could be in any number of situations. They could be 2 weeks away from interview. They could be 2 years away from the application. They could be applying next year, and they could already have various institutions of support. And then it's a complicated discussion and calculation as to what they need and what's required. So the short answer is that it depends. And I suppose the longer answer for you is book a consultation. We'll be able to go through things in detail. I'll be able to assess you. There is a chance that I might not think you're suitable for a program, but if I think you are, then I'll give you my recommendation. I'll take you through it, and we'll be able to go through the sort of financial side of things then as well.
So Chai asks, how to end the interview? What kind of questions should I prepare to ask the interviewer? So it's always a good idea to have a question prepared, just in case you don't think of one in the interview and you don't want to be under pressure in that situation. I think the best thing to do is to ask a question that you really want to know the answer to, and that you don't already know the answer to. It can be tempting to show off a little bit by asking a question that you already know the answer to as a way of sort of testing the interviewer. I don't think that's a good idea. I think the best thing to do is to think of something that you genuinely want to know from them, an area of interest for you, something that you're curious about, and ask them about that. Ask them their opinion, ask them what they think the future holds for their subject. Ask them about an issue that you discussed in the interview, but make sure it's a real question. I think is the thing to emphasize. This may be, you know, if you don't go on to get a place, this may be one of your only opportunities to meet an Oxford or Cambridge academic. So, you know, think of whatever question it is that you really want to know the answer to, and ask that would be what I suggest.
What if, Matt, what if you don't have a question, you haven't prepared one, and you can't think of one on the spot? Is it the end of the world to say, no, I don't have any questions, thank you very much for your time?
No, that's fine. I mean, they're not. You're not going to get you're not going to get to the interview and they're going to go, you know, fantastic, 5 stars, 10 out of 10. Didn't ask a question though. We're not going to have a. No, there's absolutely nothing wrong with not having a question. And I say it's a nice thing to have. Something nice to add at the end of the interview. But if you don't have anything that you want to ask, or you feel too nervous or flustered, it's not actually a test. Your question answering ability. This isn't like a kind of reverse pub quiz where you score points for asking questions. So if you haven't got anything you want to know, I wouldn't worry too much about it. But it's you know, as I say, it's one of the few things you can be sure will happen, and so it's always a good idea to prepare for the things that you can predict. So Will, are there any signs, anonymous attendee is back, we can look for during an interview to know if it's going well or badly, so that you can change your approach?
So, I mean, so based on my experience, I had 2 interviews. One of them I knew went very well. One of them I knew went very badly. So I'm just trying to think, you know, what cues were telling me that. Generally speaking, you know, if you're in the problem solving section of the interview, they've asked you some pretty advanced questions, and they're seeing how you manage with it. It's not the case that they ask one very difficult question, then you do a 10-minute monologue about the answer. It's very much a discussion and back and forth. So they might give you some information, you interpret it. They then give you some more information, you need to reinterpret it. And it might be that as you're answering and as you're trying to solve things and explore options, it might be that you start going down the wrong path. Now, generally speaking, if you do that, they will try and help you get back on the right path. So they will try and, you know, add information which sort of pushes you away from that, from whatever conclusion you were going to make. What's important is just to be wary of, you know, just to be aware of what they're saying. If they're telling you new things, you need to be listening to that, and you need to be taking that on board. If you don't, and you just sort of focus only on what you're saying and carry on down your avenue that you've chosen, then that's not going to look very good from their perspective. They're going to see how well you can work in. Effectively, this is a mock tutorial more than anything, the Oxbridge interview. They want to see how well you're going to do in a tutorial. And if you're not able to take on ideas and you're not able to adjust your thinking, then that's not a very good sign. So one thing is to very much listen to what they're saying and take that on board, particularly if it contradicts what you're saying. You know, then pay particular attention to it. It's always difficult to know for sure how well or badly things are going. But again, provided that you're open to what they're saying and you're adjusting and you're changing, that then you should be fine. It's not like this is a quiz and they just have a tick box of, you know, correct, wrong answer. And if you get all the wrong answers, then you're not given an offer. It's not how this works. They're looking for how you address things. So yeah, that's what I'd pay attention to.
The only thing I would add is to say that what might feel like a bad interview may in fact be a good interview. If you're finding the whole thing really easy, you're answering all of the questions, you're breezing through it, it's possible that they're not stretching you enough. They don't think that you can cope with the really difficult questions. So an interview where you feel that you've really made a fool of yourself and you couldn't figure anything out, it may be that they were really stretching you to see how far you could go. So as much as you can tell, your impressions of how things went might be entirely wrong. which I appreciate isn't all that comforting, but that's something I've heard from a lot of people who've been through the process, that the interview they thought was good was actually bad, and the one they thought was bad was actually good.
Yeah.
Please do keep your questions coming in. We're here until well, we're here until we run out of questions, basically.
Yeah.
So don't feel nervous about putting anything forward on that front.
One thing to say for people who, you know, have had, particularly for your Oxford applicants, if you've had interviews or your interviews in the next few days, it's really not worth spending the next month sort of painfully going through every question and every answer and sort of trying to work out if you did it well or not. You'll get your answer in a month's time or so. So there's no point agonizing over it. You know, at UniAdmissions, we very much have an approach of focus on what will actually make a difference. And once you've done the interview, you've done everything you can. You know, you've given the best performance you could at your test, you've written the best personal statement you could, you went to interview and you gave it your all. At that point, it's not worth losing sleep over it. And you're much better off not worrying about it consistently and getting a nice surprise than in January, than worrying about it consistently and getting bad news in January.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Whatever happens, you're going to have the rest of your life, whether you go to Oxford or Cambridge or not, and it's not worth stewing over for years and years to come. It's nice and it's obviously important, but it's not the end of the world if it doesn't come off for you. Now, we haven't had any other questions come in, so please do. Otherwise, we're going to escape, and I'm going to go back to watching whatever the football match at 3 o'clock is.
Yeah, I mean, particularly for people in the, you know, earlier years, you might have some more general questions about Oxford or Cambridge, or about the application process. You know, we are here, we'd be able to sort of ease your mind, clarify anything. Okay, perfect. I really struggle with essays. I know that their courses are essay based. Should I not consider Oxford or Cambridge? That's a good question. So a lot of the, you know, the science subjects are still essay subjects. You know, all the medics are doing essays. It's only really the sort of very pure stuff like the mathematicians, which stop doing essays. But so it is more essay heavy than most other degrees, most other universities. Sorry, it depends on what subject you're applying for, because basically, you know, if you're applying for history at Oxford or Cambridge or UCL and you're not sure between the two, they're both going to be pretty essay heavy. So it really does depend on which subject you're applying for. It's worth also saying that, you know, they will help you with essay writing. They don't assume a base level of essay writing when you get to university for a number of subjects. So for me, I was a pretty good essay writer, but a number of my sort of contemporaries weren't so good. And, you know, part of the tutorial time would be spent helping them, you know, in their tutorials would be spent going through how to write essays properly. So yeah, it depends a bit on your subject, it depends a bit on what you want to do. But if you are a bit apprehensive about it, there will be support for you when you're there.
Thanks, Will. That's really helpful. Yeah, wider reading suggestions. So all of our programs come with reading lists to make sure that students sort of have a starting point. But if you're looking to find an area you're interested in, often the best place to start is on Google. You know, look around for news articles, for interviews with people who are talking about subjects you're interested in, and then find the sort of the books that way. You shouldn't expect to sort of find an interest and sort of necessarily stick to it for the whole of your application process. It's worth sort of looking around and finding things. And once you've got that first book, often that will lead you off to a bunch of other ideas. So I wouldn't worry too much about the starting point. Actually, I would worry about making sure that you're consistently doing it and kind of branching out what you're interested in. Once you've started off, it's remarkably easy to find the next books. Chai asks whether it's worth researching the interviewer's specialist subject. No, this doesn't help. it's one of those things that people think will make them, help them stand out. But in fact, it sort of has the opposite effect, as it makes it look as though all you're doing is trying to sort of flatter them, rather than go through the process sort of in a sincere way. It's like going on a date, really. If you're on a date with someone, you shouldn't pretend to be interested in the things they like just to impress them. It won't work. And probably they will figure out that you're not actually interested in them quite quickly. So I would stick to what you're interested in, and don't worry too much about whether they're interested in the same subjects in terms of research as you.
I'm pretty much in my interview, I actively said I wasn't interested in the area of research that the the admissions tutor did, because I wasn't really thinking about it. So that they're not going to, that's not something which will hugely penalise you.
Fab, thanks, Will. Satish asks about signing up for our services. So the best thing to do is you should be able to see on screen the little animation of how to book the consultation. That's the best thing to do. That'll put you in touch directly with Will or someone else on his team, and they'll be able to talk through your needs and figure out what the path forward for you is. But yeah, in terms of signing up for the services, the best thing to do is get in touch with us directly. We never take people on without speaking to them first and understanding what they need and what their expectations are. But you can speak a little more detail about this, Will.
Yeah, absolutely. So book a consultation. Generally speaking, it usually takes me between 20 and 30 minutes to get a good sense of what's going on, how is the student doing, and what is going to be best for them. It's always best if I can speak with both of you. So, if you're the student, it's great if your parents are there as well. If you're the parent, it's great if your kid is there as well, because it's often helpful for me to get a sense of both perspectives, understanding sort of from the parent's perspective, their time commitments, their work ethic, also understanding from the student's perspective, the things that they find easy, the things that they find strong, why they want to do their subjects, all these different things. It's often helpful to speak with both of you to get a really good sense of everything.
Fab, thanks, Will. We had Farah asked about adding further IGCSEs in later years. You can if you like. The reason the GCSEs are used is they're a prediction. The universities use them as a kind of prediction of how you'll do in the A-levels, and they're one of the pieces of data they use to decide on shortlisting. Obviously, doing extra ones is a good idea if you think you're going to get top marks in them. Obviously, if you're going to get B's and C's, then I wouldn't bother. But yeah, if you're confident that you can up your number of A's and A stars by doing some extra ones, I don't see any harm in that necessarily.
What one word of caution is, as we know quite well, Matt, ratio of A stars matters a lot. So if you've currently got a really good, let's say you've got 10 GCSEs and you've got 9 A stars and 1 A, and you do 2 more and you get an A star and an A, you've actually lowered your A star ratio, which can be damaging. So again, sorry, yeah, Matt, go ahead.
And there's absolutely nothing wrong with only bringing 10 GCSEs to the table. Lots of perfectly successful students will only apply with 10.
Yeah, this is why I often say to people there are no yes or no answers when it comes to admissions. If a student comes to me and says, should I do more GCSEs, I can't really say yes or no without knowing quite a lot more about the situation and the background. So it really does depend.
And I think maybe finally, please get in any other questions you might have. We have a question about the online TSA course. Now, I believe, Will, you're the expert on this. We do have, by contrast with sort of the classic program, we do have smaller and shorter programs available for students who are focusing on admissions tests and things like that, available later in the year, right?
So it's actually, so this is a problem in linguistics, because it depends to what the only refers to. If it's the online or if it's the TSA, we're not entirely sure. So if you're saying, is it only the TSA course as opposed to others admissions tests, then no, we've got a huge range of things that we can support you for. If you're saying, is it only the online variant and there's not an in-person version, then yes, at the moment, everything is running virtually until, things are considerably safer for students and tutors alike. If you're saying, is it only a course as compared to sort of individual components? Generally speaking, we do like to do full programs, but of course, that's contingent on a discussion with you.
Yeah, as we mentioned that earlier, that 63% is really dependent on the time commitment and the effort that you put in. And so it's difficult for us to really have a big difference if you're only going to come and join us for a few hours in October or November, by contrast with really committing to something sustained over
Yeah.
the course of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this last one, it's probably best for us to have a proper chat about it. If you book a consultation, myself or one of my team will be able to go through things in more detail. You know, obviously there's sort of a dozen other people here who that might not be super relevant for, but in a one-to-one consultation, I can give you all the time you need and go through everything in a lot of detail. Okay.
Yeah. Question about the IB as well.
No, that was the one that I was talking about.
Oh, sorry.
In terms of like specific grade
Yeah.
requirements for a specific course.
Yeah, that's something we can research and speak to you about. Sorry, Will, I was miles away for a second.
That's okay. That's okay. There's been a final one though about the BMAT book.
Thank you for buying it. I'm glad all my work making sure I'd taken the typos out was well spent. So you're applying to start in 2022. So you'll be doing the
Year
BMAT
12.
in September. Yeah. I wouldn't rush into preparing for the BMAT right now. I think it's probably a little bit early. But it's worth making sure that you've gone through the book, you know what you need to know, and that you sort of revise those basics before you start getting too deep into the tests. I think we would advise doing a mock test a week as you come up towards it, depending on whether you do the September or the November date. But I wouldn't start in earnest on the BMAT book just yet. Save it for after Christmas. I hope.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of year 12 students that have been starting over the last few weeks, wanting to basically kick things off just before Christmas so that they can make the most of this holiday, because holidays are few and far between. Generally speaking, yeah, they won't be doing a practice BMAT every day. At this stage, it's much more about identifying weak and strong areas in your application, developing plans to assess those and address those, and then gradually building up momentum through the year. Often it's a matter of identifying and building on the general candidate profile before honing in on specifics like the BMAT. But it can be helpful to have a brief overview of any admissions tests and any parts of the application process early, because then you can have a sense as to how much time needs to be allocated to them. So if you were to do a practice BMAT early on and you got full marks, you can then think, okay, well, I'm pretty happy with that. That's not going to take up too much time. I can then focus more time to the UCAT. Equally, if you do terribly, then you might say, okay, I was going to start preparing for that in May, June. I think I'm going to bring that a bit earlier now, just to make sure that I'm not, stuck at the end without enough preparation.
Fab. Thanks, Will. That's put my mind to rest as well. I don't think I'm probably going to take the BMAT this year, but it's always good to know that I'm not.
Maybe next year, Matt. Maybe.
If I change my mind. Thanks everyone for joining us. I believe a recording of this will be distributed for those of you who would like to watch it again. I probably won't watch it again, but each to their own. So that sort of leaves us just to say thank you for all of you who've come today. Thank you for those of you who've come to more than one. We enjoy doing these, and we're glad that people like coming back. We're sorry that the slides don't vary from time to time as much as they might for those of you who are completists who come here every week. But thank you. Have a lovely Christmas. A happy Hanukkah.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
This week. And yeah, Will, I'll see you. I'll see you on Monday for work. But yeah, see everyone in the new year when we'll be back to doing these again. We haven't got an absolutely nailed down date for the first one in January, but do keep an eye out on the website and in your emails for that. Say goodbye, Will.
Yeah, bye everyone. Thanks a lot. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Bye-bye.